Hi everybody, this is Todd Olthoff from ToddOlthoff.com coming back at you with another screencast. In this week we're going to talk about some advanced firewall options using a graphical interface called IceFloor. Now if you remember in earlier screencasts we talked about the built-in firewall and how to set that up. We talked about some reasons you might want to use the firewall, such as in the case of SSH, which we've covered over the last couple weeks. That, as I've explained, when you open that port 22, that's where hackers try to get into your server. And so it's good to be able to filter that port, to be able to block certain IP addresses, to keep people out of your server. And so IceFloor is a great software program to be able to set that up to make that happen and to have a little bit more fine-tuned control over your firewall. It also would be great for those that have front-facing servers who don't have routers that serve as hardware firewalls. To be able to have this software to sort of filter their ports so that once your server is front-facing on the internet, all your ports are open unless you use a firewall to close them. So it's kind of a port forwarding method for those of you that have front-facing servers as well. So let's take a look at IceFloor. I'm going to walk you through some of the things that you can do with it. The great thing about IceFloor is that it is a graphical interface to what you normally would have to do in the terminal. And so you can get this software at handynet.com. You can see the address there on the screen. And IceFloor is donationware. And so I highly recommend that you would donate to keep the development of this software going so that they keep developing it. Because as you'll see, it really is a nice software interface and makes things a lot easier. To download, you just scroll down here to where it says Download IceFloor. And once you've done that, it'll put it in your downloads area. And you just double click here to load the image. And basically just drag this to your applications folder. Now I have already done that, so I'm just going to put this down here, and I'm going to just launch IceFloor. You can see it right there. And it's going to ask for your password when you launch it, because it is going to do some things at root. And so now the software should come up here, and there you go. This is IceFloor. Now the great thing when you get into it, it does have a quick start guide and a user guide that will give you more information. It's in PDF form. If you'd like to know a whole bunch about OpenBSD, which is what the PF Firewall is built on, there's a guide for that as well. So it's nice they do include these guides. You'll notice a couple of things right away. Down at the bottom here you'll see that the PF Firewall says enabled. And that's enabled because, if you remember, let me go to System Preferences here, that previously in System Preferences under Security, we had enabled the firewall in a previous tutorial. And so since it's on, it's already reading that the firewall is enabled and set up. Let me put that down. Now, none of the rule sets or anything like that for IceFloor are set up yet because we haven't done anything with that. And so this kind of is your panel to tell you when things are running or not. So let's just go to the Firewall tab here. A couple of things. You'll notice there's an Enable and a Test button at the top. Now the difference between these two is that in test, anything that you set up now while your computer's running, if you reboot your machine, everything starts over again and all the rules you set up go away. And in enable, what will happen is it puts scripts in there so that every time you reboot your machine, it loads the firewall options that you've set in IceFloor. And so the reason you would want a test feature is especially if you've got a remote machine that you're logging into or something like that, and you accidentally lock yourself out. The great thing is you're only locked out until your machine restarts. So if you restart your machine, you can get back in. So for a home user, when you've got everything set up, test it for a while, run it in test mode, see if you like it. If it works the way you want, then you can click Enable, and then at that point, everything is going to be running over and over again when you restart. So just a couple of differences there. You have the ability to reload when you make configuration changes to see how things are working, if they work okay. You can disable the PF Firewall and you can stop it. And then they have some predefined presets that you can use. But I'm going to skip that because I want to go through the details with you. Now you'll notice across the top we've got inbound and outbound. And so what this means is the firewall normally blocks inbound traffic that's trying to get into your server, but you can also block outbound traffic, and that's programs that are trying to phone home and send information back to the source that they came from. Normally though, I'd leave the outbound alone because once you've installed software, you feel okay with it talking going out. So let's just deal with the inbound today since we're talking about the firewall. Now when you come in here, you can see that it says filter inbound connections. You can either allow all connections to come in where there's no filtering, and as it says, unsafe, and there's really no reason to run it if you're going to allow all connections to come in. And then you've got block all inbound connections except for these. And you'll notice down below here they have basic services that you can just check the box to say, hey, these things I'm okay with these services getting through. You notice things like things like system, right? And if you hover over, it'll show you what ports it is blocking or opening, I mean. And so you can see that this here, the TCP ports and the UDP ports, and again, those are all ports and things that we normally have opened on our router in this series when we've done port forwarding. Here, you're just allowing these services and blocking anything else that's not checked or not opened. You've got Kerberos Authentication. Again, what that is that's the password and keys that get passed back and forth with your server to authenticate clients. You want to make sure that that's open. You've got Apple File Sharing, which is our AFP protocol when we talked about sharing files back and forth. You can see it uses port 548. Windows File Sharing is like Apple File Sharing, only it's just called SMB, and you can see the ports there. Then you got things like screen sharing. That's where you're able to get into your computer remotely using the screen sharing function that we talked about in server. You got Apple Remote Management. You've got printer sharing, mail, web server. You got your VPN set up there. You've got file, the FTP stuff right here in those ports. You got remote login, which is SSH, which we talked about last week. And I'm going to talk about that a little more detail in a minute. So iTunes sharing, remote events, CD, DVD sharing, iChat. You can see all this different stuff here are the ports that you can allow open. Now, I'm going to go into a couple of these in a little bit more detail. But if you look over here, you can set the action to allow everyone, which would be the default. That just says, hey, anybody who tries to come in on these ports, I'm great with it. As long as they got a username and password, I'm comfortable anyway. Or you can say only allow local networks. So only the people inside my local network and those local computers will be able to get in. It'll block everybody else. Or only allow a list of IP and subnet addresses. Okay, that's a whitelist. Now, what I would say for home users is you want to click this allow everyone feature. Because when your computer's outside your local network, you want to access your services, and if you check this one, you can't get in. This one is a little more complex because you got to list IP addresses, and that'll cause you problems as well. It's a little bit more for advanced users, so I would just click the allow everyone piece. Now, a couple of things that you can set up here. Now remember, when I talked about SSH, I talked about the fact of how when you set up SSH, that can cause some problems with people trying to ping your server. But the great thing about this is you can allow that option for SSH to happen so that the port is open. But you can also put this SSH brute force protection on, which basically means it's like the adaptive firewall, and that's basically what it sets, that if someone keeps trying to get into your server and can't get in, right, they keep trying different passwords, after several attempts, it'll eventually just lock them out for a period of 5-10 minutes. And that usually is good to kind of have the bots realize they can't get in and just sort of move on. Sometimes they'll come back, but that's one great way to protect yourself there is to do that, and that enables that. One more thing in relation to this, I'm going to skip to a tab for a minute and then come back, and that's over here on the options. Check this box for enable emerging threats, because what this is, it's a free online service that downloads all kinds of servers that are known to be hacker servers, and it'll automatically block those so you don't have to worry about it anymore when they try to enter your server. So that sets it up really nice for that to happen, and so you want to check that if you're going to use this so that you have that tool available. Let's go back to inbound for a minute. Now, this gives you ports and services that you might normally use, but sometimes you have other ports that you want to put in. You know, as I've shared port forwarding, some of the ports aren't listed here. These are just basic services. So you can click down here, this inbound custom services filter, and again, it warns you, hey, you're getting a little advanced here. This could cause problems. That's okay. Click enable, and it's going to ask you to authenticate. And then you have to click it again after you authenticate. And you notice all of a sudden the IceFloor Advanced mode shows right down here. So now what you do here is any ports that you want to open, you would put in this space right here. And so you could add ports for some of the services that I covered previously. So for instance, to use the ability to log into your server remotely on the server app, that would be port 311, which isn't listed. You'd put that in there. Port 625 is another one that relates to that. You'd put that in there. And so what would happen is as you add these ports in here, all of these ports will be open. The firewall won't block those. It'll allow those things to come in. And all you need to do is separate them by a space. If you want to do a range, as it shows down here, you would put, like it says here, 21:25. And basically that means from port 21 to port 25 will be open. Now, if you get lost and you're not sure which ports are which, what's really great about this is if you click this Show Well-Known Port Numbers, you get this great list of all the various ports and what they cover and the types of things that they do, so that you can find the ports that you want to open through this list right here. And it's a comprehensive list, and it's great. It's a great cheat sheet to kind of know what to open or close. So that's available right here as well. When you're done, you just click Reload Firewall Rules, and it'll go ahead and set those things up and get those things started. You also have the ability to do some advanced filtering if you want to, and this is where you actually add ports and allowed IP lists. You only want certain IPs to be able to access it. That's great. I would stay away from that as a home user because that's a little bit more than you need. The same with whitelists. I would stay away from that. You also have the ability to add blacklists. So if you've got certain IP addresses that you want to block, you can put them in here and it'll automatically block those and add them to your blacklist. You can also blacklist certain services on here as well. And you can click to add a list of addresses from here to blacklists as well. So that gives you, again, some fine-tuned filtering. Again, emerging threats, this is where you can update the list or have it set to auto-update, which is what I would recommend. You also have the NAT, right, which is over here, the port forwarding that we've talked about before. If you want to get very specific and do some port forwarding, you can do that. Again, I would stay away from this as a home user, especially because you've got a router. You don't need this because your router is already covering that. All right, so you want to leave that alone. Okay, so we've got custom services going, and we can just say, reload the firewall rules or close the panel. I'm just going to close the panel. You can see we've got this all set up and ready to go. Let me walk you through a couple other things real quick. You got your outbound. Again, if you want to block things from going out and phoning home, I would, again, just leave that alone. You don't really need it. Under your options, you've got, can enable IP version 6. Again, most people aren't using those, but if you want to do that, you can do it. You can override system settings. You got logs you can look at and stuff like that. Again, more than you probably need and beyond the scope of this tutorial. And then you've got other tools, log statistics, network inspector, text editor. If you actually want to edit the PF file and rules itself, you can do that. Really gives you a lot of fine tuning and things to help you set up the firewall. Now, we just go back to the firewall. When we're ready, you click test, and basically once you click test, it will enable the rule set. Everything will be set and ready to go. In fact, let me just click test real quick here. I'll say yes. And you can see it's disabling the firewall, reloading it, downloading emerging threats. It says the server's busy. I get that error every time, but yet it still seems to download the rules, so don't worry about it. And now it says it's activated. You can see it's enabled. Everything's running. The only thing that's missing is the boot scripts because I haven't clicked this enable button to do that for when it restarts. Now, that's how you set it up. One more thing I'll show you just in case you go, oh, I did this, but how do I, how do I undo it? You can basically disable the rule set right here. It says, you sure you want to do that? You say yes. Says it's reset to factory. Notice everything is disabled across there. Now the advanced mode stays on because you turned it on before, but basically everything's disabled and you're back to normal. So that gives you an idea of how to use IceFloor. Hopefully that helps you dealing with some of the more advanced firewall options. And that's all I have for you this week. I'll be back at you next week with another screencast to help you learn how to do more things with your Mac.